number one issue to Latino voters is COVID-19.
The anxiety out there that people feel is real. Latinos and people of color are dying at a higher rate.
Whether it be Cuban, Latino, Mexican, Puerto Ricans, the reality is this is a group that's seeking leadership.
He's kept every promise he can make to the American people, and he's got my full support.
Whatever steps this administration has taken have not been enough.
Voting for Joe Biden because I think he would unite the country again.
I haven't made a decision yet. I wish there was another option.
President Trump has been able to increase his Latino voters.
We love our Hispanics.
That means Joe Biden cannot take them for granted, especially in some states where the Latino vote could actually determine the political fate of this country.
Hi everyone, I'm Julio Vaqueiro. You're watching Decisión 2020.
We are at a crossroads in the United States. If you ask most people around the country, I think they'd feel that way, no matter what side of the aisle they are on, even if they are not at all political. And right in the middle of it are Latinos, nearly 20% of the population, the overwhelming majority born in the United States, the largest minority in the country, and more than 30 million eligible to vote this coming November. And yet, that massive amount of potential voters has never come out in full force. George W. Bush is seen as a high point for a Republican gaining Latino support. Among Democratic presidents, Bill Clinton got the largest Latino share, Barack Obama a close second. There are more eligible American Latinos to vote than there are voting Spaniards in Spain. Perhaps more than ever, Latinos have been in the center of the national conversation, from refugees to DACA to family separation. Now, throwing the pandemic, the coronavirus has hit Latinos disproportionately hard, both in terms of the mind-boggling, heartbreaking death toll and the devastating economic impact. We have gone from a historically low unemployment to 60% of us losing a job or taking a pay cut. How will Latinos respond at the polls? Of course, Hispanics are not just one community. It's made up of a wide range of people, young and old, liberal and conservative, people with heritage from almost 24 different countries, veterans, frontline workers, essential workers, grandparents, and first-time voters. This is Decisión 2020.
From unemployment to infections, the Latino community has been devastated by the coronavirus. Now, a little over 6 months into the pandemic, how is the community faring? And how do they see the next 6 months playing out? NBC News' Morgan Radford went to Houston, Texas, where the numbers are especially stark, to find out.
At Houston's Arnaldo Richards' Picos restaurant, manager Monica Richards de Osberg says the dinner rush looks a lot differently than it did before.
In the beginning, of course, it was very gut-wrenching, scary, trying. First few months, we were running at about 40 to 50% of what we were doing last year. And then in about May, it jumped up to about 72% of what we were doing last year.
Her father started the restaurant in 1984 after he moved from Mexico. But like many Latino-owned businesses, with COVID, they've taken an unprecedented hit.
There are a lot more people struggling than what the government is projecting are to be struggling. Tons more.
Why do you say that?
Because we see it every day. People losing their jobs, people losing their homes, not knowing where to look next, not knowing how they're going to feed their kids.
COVID has disproportionately affected Black and Latino households. And here in Houston, the nation's fourth largest city with a 45% Latino population, the numbers are staggering. 77% of Latinos reported serious financial problems since the start of the coronavirus outbreak, which is why less than 15 miles away, the line for the food bank at this local church has wrapped around the parking lot before they've even opened.
Before the pandemic, how many cars, how many people were coming?
We were serving about 200 families a week.
And now, since the pandemic?
Now over 300 families on the average per day, Monday
per
through
day.
Friday. Yeah.
What are you seeing? What are the ways that COVID has impacted the Latino community uniquely?
Well, we have men that have had jobs for 20, 30 years, or 15, 10 years, had a stable job, provided for their families, and now they're without a job. They're coming here, and you know they're not lazy, because they're up here early, and so they're just trying to feed their family.
Son trabajadores, they're hard work.
Trabajan duro, you know, and they're not lazy people. They just, man, I got to make ends meet, and I think that reverberates in the family and the kids, and, you know, goes down the chain.
Serving families who find themselves living in a nightmare.
Do you ever think that you would be in this position? ¿Pensabas en algún momento que estaría en una posición así?
No.
No. ¿Y por qué no?
No, nadie se esperaba esto, ¿no?
Nobody expected this. ¿Cuántas veces cada semana vienes acá? How many times?
No, es la primera vez que vengo, pero vengo porque...
This is your first time you've been here?
Sí.
¿Por qué estás acá hoy? Why are you here today?
Estamos aquí porque lo del COVID-19 nos ha afectado demasiado.
You're here because COVID-19 has really affected you all too much.
Sí, nosotros no tenemos empleo, o sea, no tenemos entradas de dinero,
so we don't have money coming in.
Salida de dinero, tenemos que pagar renta.
But we do have money going out. We have to pay rent. We have bills. We have finances, car bills to pay. And if you could talk to some leader in the government, the president, Congress, what would you say?
Pues yo le diría que por favor ahorita si estamos en esta situación nos ayudara.
I'd ask them to please help us in this situation.
Right now, they work with what they have, something Monica Richards says many Latinos have always had to do.
Do you think you'll make it to the other side of this pandemic intact?
You know, I hope so. I really, really hope so.
So how will the state of the economy and unemployment concerns play out this November? To shed some perspective are Cristina Tintin Ramirez. She's the founder and chief strategy officer of the JOLT organization. And this is an organization that looks to engage young Latino voters in Texas, and former U.S. Senate candidate. And Daniel Garza, a Republican and the president of the Libre Initiative. Thank you both for being with us. Let me begin with you, Cristina. So the stakes haven't been higher for Latinos. There are more than 3 million Latinos who are unemployed. 4 in 10 families are going hungry. So do you think that all of this is going to turn out into people in the polls?
You know, we are a community in crisis. You mentioned that 4 in 10 Latino families with children are facing hunger right now in the United States. We have been uniquely impacted by COVID-19 because so many in our community were essential workers. 90% of farm workers in this country are Latino. In Texas here, 70% of the construction workforce is Latino. So we had jobs where we weren't able to stay home, jobs that put us at a disproportionate risk to get sick. And we've seen Congress, Republicans refuse to extend unemployment benefits that has uniquely impacted our community. So I think that we have seen already people coming out to the polls in desperation for change and action. And I think that they are also incredibly questioning a government under Trump that has attacked Latinos, that has attacked our hard work, who's been willing to accept our labor, but not our full humanity. And all of that's being called into question this election.
Do you agree with that, Daniel? Will the pandemic make Latino voters definitely go out and vote against President Donald Trump?
Well, Julio, there's no question that I think that a lot of folks in the Latino community, millions across the country, are scraping their knees in prayer, worried for their families, worried for themselves that they're going to get by week to week because of course, the imposition of government restriction, the quarantines across the country by governors in different states. And they all vary. They all have different rules. They all have different variables to them. And it just causes a lot of uncertainty for the economy. Look, I think there is a way that we can wisely better manage this situation that is very complicated for so many governors across the country. I think we know what to do now. I think we know more of the preventative measures so that we can begin to open up the economy a bit more, supercharge productivity. That, of course, once you have more productivity, then you have more opportunity for jobs. And so it's just going to be important that I think we see this sort of bounce back that is going to take to provide, again, a better opportunity for Latinos across the country.
Now, Cristina, do you think campaigns are doing enough to engage Latino voters in the midst of this pandemic?
No, we need to see more engagement from the candidates and from the parties, especially the Democratic Party. I don't think the Latino vote can be taken for granted. We vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. We vote overwhelmingly for progressives, especially younger Latinos. Bernie Sanders won the Latino vote in the Democratic primary. You see a community that's desperate for representation, but in 2018, close to 60% of Latinos said they were never contacted by a candidate or a party. That has to change if the largest non-white voting bloc in this country is truly going to have the representation that we deserve.
Now, Daniel, President Trump has been focusing a lot in the Latino vote, especially in Florida. What do you think resonates with the Latino vote in Florida regarding President Trump's message?
Well, I think he's done a fine job, actually, of now showcasing a record that he did not have in the previous election cycle. And that record resulted in an economic bonanza where Latinos benefited from tremendously before, of course, this artificial recession was imposed. We had record labor participation rate, record unemployment, record wage growth, record home ownership. And so those were happy days. And of course, things have changed because of COVID-19, of course. But even so, I think his campaign has done a great job, actually, of generating a lot of excitement. One, because of the events, the flotillas, the caravans that you see of Latinos out there. I think one of the best things that is happening is that I think they're connecting better because they're relating better to the Latino voter. What I mean by that is that they are hiring from the Latino community. Their outreach teams look like us, like Latinos. And I think it's better when you can connect on two important things. One, that you care. Second, that your ideas work. And that, of course, comes across best when Latinos are engaging and mobilizing Latinos because they trust Latinos who have a shared language, a shared culture, and shared experiences.
Do you think, Cristina, that Biden is doing enough? I mean, he's doing worse than Hillary Clinton was doing at this moment of the race. What is he doing wrong?
Well, first off, I want to say I disagree with Daniel that our community was in some flourishing prosperity before this recession. We had the highest uninsured of any ethnic group, which is why we have suffered so disproportionately under COVID-19. The Trump administration has consistently attacked the integrity of our families, has led to massive separation of Latino families and targeting of our communities. I don't think that's lost on the Latino community. However, we need the Biden campaign to invest more heavily in reaching Latino voters, connecting with Latino organizations, and uplifting what they have done in the past and where they stand on the issues that deeply matter to Latinos. The Latino community lives in key states, Florida, Texas, Arizona, California. We need to make sure that we're seeing the Biden administration campaign invest heavily, especially in Arizona and Texas, where you see great support amongst the Latino community for the Biden campaign. But our community cannot be taken for granted. It's not enough to point to Trump and say all of the harm that he has caused for our communities. We need to know how we're going to make it out of this crisis. This is an economic and healthcare crisis that our community has never seen anything like it. And I cannot iterate deeply enough how painful this moment is for our community. I have met here in Texas with family members who lost loved ones because they didn't have health care and they waited to go to the doctor even though they were so sick. I've met people that are undocumented that never received $1 from the government even though they've been here 25 plus years and always paid their taxes and now are homeless. This is what is happening in our community across the country.
Thank you, Cristina Chinsun Ramirez, Daniel Garza. Thank you very much to both of you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Julio.
Thank you.
Coming up, after a short break, will tackling racial inequalities be a priority for Latinos in the polls? Stay with us.
Racism is definitely a concern in the Latino community. I definitely feel that it's internal and external. I think at one point we need to also look at ourselves in our community and see what type of racism are we perpetuating.
Racism isn't more what we should be concerned about rather than injustice between the poor and the rich.
I came to protest because my daughter is half black and I'm Afro-Latina and we need to know our roots.
Since the police system was basically raised on systematic racism, they target black communities and minorities. So seeing it is like, am I gonna be next?
I am here to tell everyone that no authority can get rid of minorities. We are strong, we are here, and we know our rights.
Don't shoot, hands up! Don't shoot, hands up! Don't shoot!
This is an election year. Use your power.
What happened to George Floyd is not an isolated incident, and as a Latino man, it is my responsibility to act in solidarity with my black and brown brothers and sisters.
I really hope to see that the law enforcement in particular will think twice when they come across minorities. Listen, like, we are human just like you. We respect your job, but respect us. You are supposed to protect us.
No justice, no peace.
We could feel compelled as a Latino community to come out and say that we support the Black Lives Matter movement.
In multiple countries across the world, there are black Latinos, no matter you're Mexican, Colombian, South America, Central American, no matter what, and they seem to forget that because of race and color. And we can't forget that. This is why it's our fight too, because these are our brothers and sisters.
Hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot.
America's suburbs are an important part of winning the presidency, and some of the biggest suburbs are increasingly Latino. NBC News' Gary Schwartz sat down with some suburban Latinos to find out what issues matter most to them.
Los Angeles has the most Latinos of any county in America, and many of them live here in the San Fernando Valley, where Latinos outnumber whites and make up 42% of its population. When it comes to the November election, Latino-majority suburbs will be key. Miami-Dade, Florida is nearly 70% Latino, and Maricopa County, Arizona has more than 1 million Latino residents. Clark County, Nevada, home to Las Vegas, is more than 30% Latino. All urban areas that include vast suburbs. Sofia Cortez is a marketing executive. She lives in Chatsworth, a town in West San Fernando Valley, with her husband and her children.
We're supporting Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, everybody.
Yes.
Have you guys always supported Joe Biden? Was he your first pick?
Actually, no. This is pretty much a Bernie house.
Bernie house all the way?
All the way.
Okay.
I don't like the centrist approach that Biden has.
But for them, the alternative isn't an option.
The moral compass of our current president is flawed. People of color are only one thing to him: labor.
They do believe that Biden could make some progress on issues that they care about.
Immigration reform is by far the most important issue for Latinos.
Healthcare needs to be universal. It needs to be easily accessible to those of color. It's just a necessity.
While Biden might not be in danger of losing the Latino vote, the margins are critical. Elsa Aldeguer supports the president. She's part of the 28% of Latinos who voted for Trump in 2016.
Good to see you.
More than voted for Mitt Romney 4 years earlier. Recent polls show similar support for the president in this election.
Trump all the way.
Elsa said she never even voted before Trump's 2016 run, but she was so moved by his candidacy that she started Latinos for Trump. And her group helped organize this car parade through the valley last weekend.
He's for law and order, the safety of our nation, the wall, the border. He supports the unborn. He is for our veterans and for our military. Those things are precious to me. He has people coming to pray in the Oval Office. Like, I love that.
She was born in El Salvador. As a child, her family drove to the U.S. border, a difficult and dangerous journey.
I think that if you're not happy in the country where you are, come I'm here legally.
So you think that somebody in El Salvador right now that's fleeing persecution can come to the United States and immigrate legally? Easily? I mean,
you know what? I don't understand what they have to fill, what forms they have, but I'm sure that there is help. They just have to look for it.
And when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement and protests,
Well, I've been stopped many times at the police, and all you have to do is follow police orders. That's it.
so you don't support the idea behind the Black Lives Matter movement?
Oh, no, not at all. My son is black, and my son can tell you all lives matter, and he's pretty dark.
meanwhile, Sophia's family feels a sense of solidarity with the movement.
Do you think the majority of Latinos support or stand with what Black Lives Matter stands for?
I think that they do because, you know, us Latinos and Hispanics, we have faced sort of the same kind of problems. And when we've had issues, when we have protested for our rights, immigrant rights, there have been our brothers and sisters of color who have also protested with us. So for us, it's kind of like us colored people have to stick together.
The fight for racial and ethnic equality is center stage this year. According to a Telemundo and BuzzFeed News poll, 85% of registered young Latino voters say that social justice is the main reason why they will go out and vote this year. So to talk about this and to discuss the impact of the race issues that may have this November, we are joined by Anthony Cavazza. He is the chairman of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly of California. Also, Rosalind Damiana Lake Montero. She's a youth advocate. She's also a Latin America foreign policy analyst and Telemundo contributor, Carmen Marquez. Thank you very much to all of you for being with us tonight. Thanks for joining this discussion. Let me begin with you, Rosalind. So racial issues are a top priority for Latinos, especially young Latino voters. Why would you say that is?
Okay, so also just want to thank you guys for having me here for the platform. I'm very blessed. I hope that we all connect, heal, and change the narrative. I'm also a teacher, and I want to say that very loud and clear because with these elections, right, I am a teacher. I teach Spanish in an Afro-American community. I know that a lot of my seniors are going to get to vote this year as well. The issues with the race are very important in our country. I am an immigrant. You know, I'm a woman of color who's also an immigrant, who is also a teacher. So I deal with a lot of, you know, I face a lot of things, like many of us. So I just want to say really quick that we come from countries in Latin America where we know that there's not representation that's adequate to the population that we have. That's why it's so important for us as Latinos to unite in the fight for Black Lives Matter, because we know that Black lives exist in the United States and also in Latin America. So I know that voting for us younger people, for the millennials and some of the Gen Z kids, racial issues are so important because that's what we're living. That if we're not, and I advocate them to go and vote, because if we are going to be complaining about everything, we're not changing things. It's okay to do the chatting, right? But yes, we have to be about it. We're supposed to be healing, and we are the American dream. We just have to make sure the American dream starts looking like us. So that's why we need to make sure we vote to change, you know, to change things that are bothering us.
So, you know, Rosalind, Telemundo survey showed that 3 out of 4 young Latinos reported that they, over the past 2 years, they were the target of a racist attack. So, Carmen, I want to ask you, how do you think this will impact the way they vote?
Yeah, well, Julio, thank you so much. This is a really important question. I did a series of stories on colorism and on racism within the Latino community. I think that young Latinos are demanding more of themselves and of their culture. And what we saw in these past months with Black Lives Matter and social injustice movements is that it was a sort of awakening for Latinos to see that, you know, they were experiencing racism with their grandmothers at their homes, with their grandmothers, their tios saying, saying mejorar la raza, which means to better the race. And this is something, once again, that Latinos are willing to change and to demand more of themselves and their culture and their representation here in the United States.
So, Anthony Cavazza, the Trump administration it's unpopular with many Latinos because of the way the president has referred to immigrants, to Hispanics. But he has also managed to court other more conservative Hispanic Americans. What part of Trump's message resonates with them and with you in particular?
Yeah, thank you so much, Julio, for having me here. I think that what a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of the stuff that the Trump administration or just Trump himself has said has been taken out of context, seriously. And when you look at the policies, you see that he is actually helping the Hispanic and the Latino community. It kind of baffles me that you have a lot of, left-leaning or Democratic Latinos that quickly forgot that Biden administration under Obama, right, built the cages that the children were in, and Trump ended that in 2018. People also forget that Biden was the person, along with his administration, that deported the most undocumented than any other administration in history. So as a conservative myself, I do believe that we do need representation. And that's why I am the chairman for the Republican National Hispanic Assembly of California. Representation is not only going to be led in Congress or in the chambers of Congress, it also needs to be at the local level. You have Black Lives Matter, which in my opinion is doing a really poor job of showcasing the real issues in the Black community. But my organization, what it's going to be doing is we're going to be highlighting a lot of what the issues are within the Hispanic and the Black community. We talk about racism, we talk about systemic this, but as immigrants, I'm the son of an immigrant myself. In one lifetime, using this system, we're able to become the best versions of ourselves. So I have a really hard time understanding how the system that people continue to say is racist, how are we able to lograr? How are we able to achieve so much under this systemic racism? I think that we need to look inward into our communities and the real issues that are affecting us, which is high divorce, fatherlessness in the homes, and all of those things that are important issues that need to be tackled.
Rosalind, do you agree with what Anthony just said? Black Lives Matter is doing
Anthony,
a poor job.
I'm so glad you're here. I want to really quickly say Happy Independence Day to all of the Central American countries. I'm sure you are aware of that as somebody that sits on there. And Happy Independence Day to Mexico tomorrow. I completely disagree. I'm glad that you have had that experience of growth as a Black woman who's also an immigrant, a teacher, an advocate for the youth. I don't see what you see, and I definitely hope that what you're seeing and with your data, it shows that where you are, this is working. This system is not working where I am at in Washington, D.C., and it has not been working for many years. As an immigrant, I've seen in our countries, I know that you said you come from parents that are immigrants. I've seen firsthand what it's like not to move up in a social class because of your background, right? In this country, we have the opportunity to move up in social class. So I say that we don't only need representation, but we need adequate change, and we need more empathy from people that look like us and sound like us. That's why I say Black lives are not, they don't only matter, but they also exist in the Latino community and in other communities that are part of minorities. Because as an Afro-Latina, I kid you not, I know so many Latinos organizations that they are saying that they're not supporting Black Lives Matter, or they're saying that they do support Black Lives Matter. But where are your funds going in? How are you racially classifying people, right? So also encourage our community to do the census, to do all of those things, because you're not going to talk about things that you've never felt personally. I'm a woman, and I did not get your name. Beautiful queen, I see you to my right. Thank you for your studies on colorism. That's something so important. And my generation, you know, us millennials and Gen Z, we are dismantling these narratives within our households. But now we have to be in the big position like you, in your position as a representative of the Republican Party in California. Great for you. I'm glad you're able to do that. But you also have to understand that some of us never had it the way you did because of, you know, we just didn't have it. And it's okay that we didn't have it. We just have to have empathy and sympathy when we talk about these issues. And don't boo, vote. So, I'm sorry, it took a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, if I can respond to that.
No, that's important. It's important. Let me, very quickly, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm not sure what you mean by hey, I praise you when you said, for the things that you had. I come from a single parent home. I grew up in one of the worst neighborhoods in Los Angeles. I'm under Democratic leadership that has done nothing for the Hispanic community out here. They've done nothing for the middle class. They've done nothing for Hispanic growth. So I don't come from a privileged place. Like I said, my mother was an immigrant that, came to this country to look for work. She's been a proud janitor for 35 years. She's worked night shift to put food on the table. So I apologize if I made it seem that I come from a very privileged background, but I do not. We just believe in hard work pays off.
Yeah.
So
hard work, but when it's a system that condenses you from moving,
this is
then
a
that's the
very
issue. But I do say,
conversation.
Really quick, I do say that if it hasn't worked for you in your where you're at, that's good, right? That you're making a difference. I didn't mean to say that you were privileged, but I think that what you said sounded a bit without enough sympathy.
Yes,
that's all. So maybe we got to work on that.
I guess what's important is to have these discussions and figure out how to move forward. Thank you very much to all three of you, Anthony Cavazza, Rosalind Damiana, Lake Montero, and Carmen Marquez for joining this discussion. Thank you so much. Mark your calendars. This year, voting will be different. Here's what you need to know about how you can vote.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that.
Our country is crying out for leadership. Leadership that can unite us.
If you hadn't caught on to it yet, this year is an election year. On November 3rd, we'll be choosing not just our next president, but some of our senators and our representatives. In order to take part, you need to vote. And in order to vote, you need to register. More than 150 million people are already registered to vote in the U.S. If you're not one of them, you've still got time, but you need to move quickly. First things first, do you qualify? You need to be a U.S. citizen and at least 18 years old. In most states, you can register to vote as a minor as long as by the time voting day comes around, you're already 18. You also need to be a resident in the state that you're voting in. But now, how do you register? Online, filling out this national voter registration form and mailing it, or also heading over to your local election office. Have your address, your ID, and your social security at hand, and be ready to choose your party. It's a defining moment. Democrat, Republican. Of course, you could go with another option, no party affiliation. You can be independent. If you were to pick one side, that doesn't mean that you have to vote for the candidate in that party in the general election. You can change your mind. The party slot when you register matters more in primaries and caucuses, but those are pretty much behind us. Registration deadlines vary by state, so make sure that you check yours right here before it's too late. And now let's go over some scenarios. Say you've registered to vote in the past, but you moved to another state or you changed your name. That means you need to update your information, especially if you plan to vote by mail. And if you're a U.S. citizen, but you're living out of state or part of the armed forces stationed in another country, make sure that you're registered because you can vote with an absentee ballot. Go to this website, fill out this form, and you're good to vote. And finally, if you registered in the past, but you want to make sure that everything is in order, checking is really easy. This is where you go. Election Day is on November 3rd, and this year it falls during a worldwide pandemic. Needless to say, yes, things will be different. There will be fewer voting centers and a lot more voting by mail, something that's already started to spark a little bit of a controversy. The choice of how you vote is up to you, just like the choice of who you vote for. But if you do decide to cast your ballot from afar, keep in mind that it takes longer, so try to do it with a little bit more time. In any case, if you are eligible to vote, don't let others choose for you. Register.
Thank you so much for watching Decisión 2020. I'm Julio Vaqueiro. Have a great night.
The issues that are driving me to vote right now are taxes, cost of living, and immigration.
This whole election and this whole political cycle has just overcharged every issue. So personally, for me, I'm voting because everything's at stake.
Healthcare should be number one.
Who's going to help us get out of the current situation that we're in with the pandemic, as we know?
The current president basically has created more of a division than any sort of unification.
I also think that the economy is a really big one for me. People have just lost everything because of coronavirus, so I feel like that's really important to really bounce back into November.
The candidate who has tried to reach for the Latino vote if I'm being honest, is no one. I'm voting for Biden because he's not Trump.
In this election, I'm voting for Trump.
I think for Joe Biden.
I think it's a rude awakening that not all Latinos are made the same. Not all Latinos believe in the same things. Not all Latinos are grouped in the same groups.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.